Often mention creating and preserving home ownership in a very equitable manner.
Yep.
What would that look like for all of us?
Right. So we create home ownership, like by building and selling homes, but I work on the other side where we preserve home ownership. So people already have their home, we help them fix it up, or we help modify the home, okay, so that they can preserve a decent place to live, okay? And for both creating and preserving, what we really try to do here in the Twin Cities is do it in an equitable manner. And what that means is that in many communities, as well as our community, is that there's a big disparity between white people who own homes and people of color. So it's a disparity of about 75% to 25%. And so Habitat works really hard to sell 75% of the homes that we build and sell to people of color to help balance that out. Now we have a long way to go, but that's what we want to do in our community so that everyone can have a safe, decent place to call home.
Definitely. And now also, you mentioned, churches get involved. From my understanding, Habitat for Humanity is a Christian nonprofit, has Christian roots.
Christian roots, Christian values, absolutely. And it's really important for Habitat that we focus in on justice issues. And Jesus taught about being just and about being equitable. And so, Jesus has had a big impact on my life, and I feel really blessed. So, working at Habitat is a way that I can bless others with the blessing that I've received. And so I do it to help all people get a safe, decent place to live. It's the right thing to do, and I think it's what Jesus would do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we mentioned a little bit that the pandemic and just the distributing of housing between different people groups in our communities.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge in that realm for reaching that, for kind of, I don't know, fixing that is the right word?
Yeah, maybe balancing
that
things out. Yeah, I think it's critical, especially for what I would call the white community, that we understand the advantages that we've had to education, to jobs, and to housing, and that we understand that privilege, and so that we make sure that folks who may not have had that privilege elevate those needs, so that people know that we need to balance things out, because right now they're out of whack. And Minnesota is in the top 3 in terms of inequities in housing.
Wow.
So we think of ourselves as a very progressive state, but in terms of fair housing, we're one of the worst offenders. And so, and that's not saying, that quote, we're bad people, but it's what we need to do is we need to educate ourselves and to understand the advantages that we've had growing up and the connections we've had to whether get an education or get housing, and to realize whether you're a foundational black person or Latino or Native American, that you haven't had those opportunities, even though there are laws in the books. In practical manner, we've had a lot of things that have just not been right and fair for people of color. And so, I don't know if you knew this, but Jesus was a person of color.
Was he now?
Sometimes we want to think that that wasn't maybe the case, that he was a white Anglo-Saxon, but nope, he really was. And Jesus was he really identified with the homeless and the poor and the oppressed. And to me, we need to lift up those needs as he lifted up those needs. And that's why I'm so passionate about doing this with Habitat.
Yeah.
And Habitat as an organization is passionate. And it's really come out even much greater this past year with the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
You know, that's really had a big impact on my life. And it's really kind of made me recommit to really breaking down barriers for especially those who are black, to make sure that their plight, their needs, their struggles are elevated. So I want to be an ally to really listen, because, you know, for many years, you know, I've been serving my community, but for many years I've been really ignorant and really not engaged like I should to really understand those needs in our community. And unfortunately, a lot of people have died and have been murdered because we really don't understand the needs and the oppression of people of color that have gone on for many years. Again, laws may have been changed, but the practical day-to-day workings have not changed for a lot of people.
For folks who are maybe in a city who, I mean, it sounds like their Habitat for Humanity is in quite the number of places around the country. If folks weren't to get involved with Habitat for Humanity, what encouragement would you give them to still get involved in this issue?
Yeah, so I would find a local community, a local housing nonprofit in their community. There's a number of them out there. I would do that. You could also just educate yourself on the needs of equitable, affordable housing and get plugged in that way. Get to know your state representatives. Get to know your state senators. And see what your local communities are doing about affordable housing. Contact your local community development corporation. So every county has a community development organization, and that's where you get information about housing in your community. So that's another way. Like some churches are involved with affordable housing.
Yeah.
And they go and they help not only the people who are in their congregation, but they help their neighbors fix up their homes. And so that's another way that you can get involved. So a lot of ways to get involved. Service organizations like the Lions and is another great way to volunteer in your community. So a lot of different opportunities.
Seems like there's plenty out there. It probably takes some initiative on our parts to get involved.
Yep, and the great thing is there's Google.
We do live in the digital age.
Absolutely.
Where you can definitely.
Yeah.